Welcome to the AA Podcast, our little corner of the web where we are not afraid to discuss tough questions like,
when did nutrition, health, movement, and stress management become alternative medicine?
Where we embrace challenges in all aspects of life to become healthier and stronger versions of ourselves.
And where food and movement are the best kinds of medicine, and cooking meals at home is a revolutionary act. Welcome back to another episode of the Double. You are listening to Ashley Olson
and Andrea Crane.
We are so excited to have you back with us today. And today we are going to take some of our listener questions. We had some really good ones. So we are excited to dive into those. But before we get to that, we are going to share our weekly Bible verse. Mine is coming from Psalm chapter 30, verse 4 and 5. And it says, "Sing praises to the Lord, O you saints, and give thanks to his holy name. For his anger is but for a moment, and his favor is for a lifetime. Weeping may tarry for the night, but joy comes in the morning." And honestly, the verse came to me because I was mountain biking this morning, and it was very early. and I just kept thinking, joy comes in the morning. So that was the verse that God gave me this morning.
That's so awesome. I love it. Well, mine, true to form, is completely out of context and a little apocalyptic. So mine is Hosea 4:6. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because thou hast rejected knowledge, I will also reject thee. So anyway, yeah.
Bring it.
So let's get some knowledge up in here. How about that?
I love it.
Okay.
Before we get into today's questions, though, we both thought that it would be really helpful for our listeners to know how to ask questions, because there's so much that goes into what seemingly feels like a very simple and innocent question, but really when it comes down to it, it's not a black and white yes or no answer for the majority of these questions. And so we thought it would be really good to kind of just help you guys know how to ask questions to us. That way that we have more information to help you in the sense of how we answer the questions.
Mm-hmm. How to best ask a question so that we can help not only you, but provide the best information for the broadest number of audience members. And so, and I know it gets frustrating because I feel like medical people, health people, nutrition people, it seems like we are constantly equivocating, right? We're constantly saying, well, it depends. And that is like a patient's worst answer coming from somebody that they're asking a question to. But I would just, in our defense, I would just like to say it often does depend. Mm-hmm. And it depends for a really good reason. Now, there are certainly gravity, like cellular metabolism and respiration.
Okay. It's okay. I'm going to just shut down our FaceTime too. Yes, I can. I just shut down our FaceTime just because it's taking another broadband. So I can also I can edit this out too.
Hey, you know what? I'm going to go turn off the TV and turn on the fan and the sound machine. Hang on.
Okay.
That might help. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Um,
Why don't you start back at the it depends.
okay. Okay. And you'll just like put that together
Yeah.
like you do.
Hmm.
Okay. Okay. And just tell me when to start. You want to start at 45?
Yep. That sounds good.
Okay. Okay. So I know this is really frustrating for patients, for listeners, for anybody that, stops to ask somebody a question that they think is a really clear and straightforward question. And often it just isn't. And it's it's really frustrating when you get this equivocating, what seems like an equivocating answer of it depends. We say that all the time. Well, it depends. And then I see people's eyes roll back in their heads and they they just sort of drift away from me at that point. But the reason, in our defense, the reason that it depends is because we're fearfully and wonderfully made, right? We're all individual. There has never been, nor will there ever be, another person just like you, with your genetics, with your exposures, with your traumas, with your from the medication or supplements or diet that you take into your body. uh, there's never been another person who has that exact set of circumstances with your exact DNA.
Hmm.
And so I hope the enormity of that kind of sinks into people. And so, when we say it depends, it's really through the lens of just your individuality. Now, that said, there are certain truths, right? There
Hmm.
there are certain truths like gravity, like cellular respiration, like you eat, you get energy. There are certain underlying foundational principles, truths that that we can apply across the board. Like arsenic is bad for you. Okay.
Hmm.
So that is the kind of thing, and not to simplify too much, but that's the kind of thing that we really want to get out there. And so when I'm about to say something that's going to sound like a contradiction, but it's not. So the more specific that people can get with their questions, the more generalized our answers can be and apply to the widest swath of people.
Absolutely. So with that being said, if you see our question box on the socials and you're like, I can't type everything out,
Right, right.
just shoot us an email. It's
Hmm.
askaapodcast@gmail.com, and you can get way more specific with your question,
Hmm.
and then
Yeah,
like Andrea said, we can give a better generalized answer.
yeah.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
and I also want to qualify that with, we can't take your medical history.
right.
We can't we can't like,
Please do not send
hey,
us your labs,
oh
and
my gosh,
yeah, don't do
yeah,
that. No, 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 no.
your your 3-inch binder, do not UPS it to us
Nope,
because we
nope.
can't do anything with that. But yeah, like if you can gosh, if you can ask, like, maybe why you're asking the question, that
Mhm.
often helps. Helps to give context, because maybe there is a better question that would give you more information if we knew why you were asking. That kind of
Absolutely.
thing. Yeah.
And as always, there's nothing, Andrea put this in the notes, that there is nothing that can take a place of eyes on,
Mm,
hands on encounter with a provider, trainer, or coach. So if you have a PCP, a trainer, or coach that you're working with, there's nothing that can take the place of that we can do here on the podcast.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just say, like, a normal functional medicine intake, like when I establish a patient for the first time, that's an hour-long appointment. And, in today's conventional medicine, that's kind of unheard of. But really, at that hour-long appointment, and we're moving. Like,
Mhm.
we're going through your birth history all the way up to current events, and how did we get where we are? So, yeah, and obviously we can't even scratch the surface on a podcast question. So,
Absolutely. But hopefully that helps you as a listener understand that, questions aren't just as simple as a yes, no, or, oh, yeah, that sounds like a great thing to do.
yeah.
There's a lot more
Mhm.
that goes into the question. So if you guys can just help us give some more not a context to the question,
Yeah.
that'll help
Yeah.
us. So,
Yeah.
with that being said, let's dive into our first
Yes.
question, Andrea.
Well, all right.
Go ahead.
Okay, so the question came in, what, if any, is the maximum age to even do keto? So, this is an interesting question.
Mhm.
Um, because I don't think so. Again, keto is for any of you that don't have a good firm definition of what keto is. That's okay because nobody does.
Mhm.
It is 50,000 things to 50,000 different people. Um, so what's called a clinical keto, and that is primarily used for things like refractory epilepsy. So these are
Mhm.
folks that who are having seizures. They cannot be controlled on medication. We have found that an extraordinarily high fat diet, like 95% fat,
So crazy.
yeah, that kind of diet is very neuroprotective for these folks, and we can often get a hold of those kinds of seizures.
Mm.
Um, also, there has been some study on an extremely high fat diet and neuroprotective effects on age dementia, like
Mm.
Alzheimer's. The jury is still out on those things, but initially and I don't, okay, this is my personal opinion.
Mhm.
I don't think that it is just the fat. I think that there is more to this picture than just eating, bacon fat from sunup until sundown, right? It's obviously going to be more nuanced than that. The
Mhm.
type of fat is going to matter, what other nutritional inputs are going to matter, etc. So yeah, that's kind of what we see is normally a clinical keto, which is technically like 90% and above of the calories are devoted to fats, and that is almost certainly unsustainable for everyone out there. I mean, unless you're treating something that is completely debilitating.
Mhm.
Yes.
So, back to the question on the
Mhm.
maximum age.
Yeah.
It
Okay. So
it
yeah, and
depends.
right. So keto in the common parlance, as we talk about it as a society, it's kind of been uh, the rage for I don't know how many years now, but essentially what it is eating a higher fat, very low carb diet. Often you'll see carbohydrate at 20 grams or less. People seem to know that number, 20 net carbs or less, or 50 net carbs or less. And that's a very, very low carbohydrate number. Um, Now, I will say, I would like to, I'm not ducking the question, but I'm just going to change it a little bit. Um, and I'll break the population. Instead of stratifying by age, let's stratify by gender,
Mm.
because males they seem to do much better with keto long term. So eating that low carbohydrate, higher protein, there is a type of keto that both Ashley and I would espouse that we like much better than a super high fat diet. We are all about the protein. And so Ashley and I'm speaking for you, friend, but
No,
I think we're on the
you're good.
okay, I think we're on the same page here with you absolutely need adequate protein. That's the number that you have to hit.
Yes.
Um, but modulating fat, bumping fat up, and making carbohydrate lower as a
Mhm.
contributing macronutrient, I think is a good call. But for women, um, they don't often do well long term. Now, in the short term, they'll feel amazing. They'll have a new lease on life. But honestly, I think a lot of that benefit is simply because they're removing a lot of trash from their diet. So when you look
Mhm.
at boxed foods, you look at these really nutrient poor foods that we, rip open a package and eat, often they're trash carbohydrates.
Yeah.
So just necessarily, you're getting that out of your diet when you go keto.
Mhm.
And so is the benefit coming from the renewed macronutrient distribution, or is it coming from just getting the garbage out of your diet? And I would submit, I think most of the time, most of the benefit is coming from the latter.
I would agree too. And I would also add too that keto is a diet because fat and protein are so satiating, it's a lot more feasible to be in a caloric deficit. So those
Mhm,
who are needing to lose weight, it
mhm.
is a great method because you have
Yes.
much more satiating feelings, so you're not feeling
Mhm,
ravish all the time. And so that also brings up a good point that when you are doing keto, it's very important to make sure that you don't get to the point where you're kind of in a starvation. You're starving yourself because you do feel that satiating feeling. So if you are getting to a body weight that is one either a good maintainable body weight, or maybe you're getting to the point where like, oh shoot, I'm losing a ton of weight, like I'm kind of like almost skeletal. This is a
yeah,
tell sign that we need to bump up those calories.
right.
And a way that you can do that is obviously if you wanted to stay on keto, you're going to have to bump up those fats and
Yeah,
protein a little bit more, but that's also going to bring a lot more satiating feeling. So you're either going to
yeah,
have to push past that barrier, or maybe this is a good time to transition out of keto and
yeah,
not go full on carbs again, but start bringing up those carbs slowly to be able to bring
right.
up the caloric intake.
Right. Yeah, and Ashley hit on such a great point. Once you do get to that place, which again, for women, I've seen women crash as early as 3 months on keto.
Mhm.
Um, Now, more often, it's between 6 months and a year that they will crash. But women really seem to run well long term on a mix of carbohydrate. Now, the problem with carbohydrate is that gosh, there's just so many trash sources out there.
Yep.
And so when you start to add them back, like if you make that call that, well, this is a good time because I don't think I can push any more fat or protein into my diet because I'm just
Mhm.
not hungry. Um, that's probably a good time to reintroduce some carbohydrate. And I would say, work with somebody who knows what they're doing because they can help you reintroduce good carbohydrates that are actually going to feed your gut microbiome, and that is a discussion for another month and a half. um,
Mhm.
but yeah, good carbs that are going to feed your gut bugs and that are going to contribute to your digestive function and not take away from your overall health.
Absolutely. And this is a whole nother discussion too, but even the timing of introducing the carbs, especially if you're a weight training individual,
Mm,
um, prioritizing those during your day and week so that way they're
mhm.
utilized the best.
Oh
So
yeah, and honestly, working with a trainer like Ashley, she knows more about like periodizing your carbohydrate consumption to maximize physical effort than I will ever know. So that's, yeah, that is her world for sure.
awesome. Well, I think we did good on that one. Hopefully
Okay.
that helped answers that question for you guys. So the next question is, what are your thoughts on ashwagandha? Benefits or risks?
Yeah, so and I'll just go ahead and read the last part of that question too. Is it true that it can be good to reduce belly visceral fat? So, yeah, this is kind of a big question, but I'm going to hit the high points. So, ashwagandha is fantastic. it's considered an adaptogenic herb, and so it's kind of magical in that it can, and we've all heard of cortisol. Cortisol's been really demonized, and it is it is terrible. It is terrible when there's too much of it hanging around for long periods of time.
Or too
Um,
low.
or too low, yes, too so that's what I was getting to, is if you don't have cortisol, you will die. So you you cannot your executive functions in the body cannot happen without cortisol. You wake up in the morning because of a cortisol spike. You go to bed at night because cortisol is supposed to tank as melatonin goes up. So there's this hormonal dance that has to take place in a well-functioning body, okay? So ashwagandha is an adaptogenic herb, and that literally means that it can kind of adapt to either circumstance. So if you don't have enough cortisol upon waking, ashwagandha can kind of goose that production. And if you have too much throughout your day, ashwagandha can lower that level. And so that's why it's called an adaptogen, is because it literally adapts, helps your body to adapt to the current circumstances. Um, now, benefits, yeah, benefits are just what I've talked about. It can help lower or raise cortisol accordingly. Risks, not too many risks associated with ashwagandha. However, I want to put this qualifier on it. A lot of people don't know this. Ashwagandha is a nightshade.
Mm-hmm.
And so nightshades, they are, a lot of times if somebody comes to me and they've got arthropathies, pain, like globalized pain in their joints, and it just, we've obviously we're gonna do a lot of ruling out of other things, but if we get down to it and you've just got these really painful joints, one of the things that I might recommend is to remove nightshades from your diet, because nightshades as a plant family, they contain compounds called glycoalkaloids, and these are actually toxins to humans, and it's part of the plant's protective mechanisms. So it protects the plant against predators.
Hmm.
And so, as it secretes these glycoalkaloids in certain people, they're sensitive to this, and it really seems to congregate in the joints. It causes an inflammatory response in the joints, and sometimes it's not one nightshade or another. Sometimes it's all nightshades. Sometimes it's just one particular nightshade that people can't tolerate, and so yeah, that is really the risk of ashwagandha. And so then the last part of the question kind of harkens back to the first part. Is it true that it can be good to reduce belly visceral fat? Well, cortisol, as we know,
Mm-hmm.
it puts on that visceral fat. And
Mm-hmm.
so if ashwagandha is lowering the amount of cortisol, then that makes it easier for the body to get rid of or shed that visceral or truncal adiposity.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
And would you say so? When you were talking about the inflammation of the body, now
Mhm.
going back to our autoimmune discussion, would you also would there be other autoimmunities that should also that might also need to consider removing nightshades, or is it typically just like the arthropathy?
Well, there are, and yeah, here's the problem with autoimmunities. They run around in packs, right? Like they're never alone. There's always one hanging out in the wings waiting to make its debut. And
Mm,
um, so yeah, so many autoimmune diseases have features of various arthropathies, like your finger joints hurt in the morning. Is it unilateral, like is it on one side or is it on both sides? That often tells us clues about the potential identity of your autoimmunity. And so because that's a feature of so many autoimmunities, I kind of take this on a symptom by symptom basis. And so
Okay.
if I'm not getting any traction with anti-inflammatories, then I might start going after nightshades in a patient.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. So basically, ashwagandha, it depends.
Mhm. Yeah. So satisfying, isn't
I
it?
know. Welcome to
Yikes.
our podcast.
I
Just kidding.
know. I
Okay,
know.
it's all right. No, that was a great explanation. So thank you.
Cool.
So our next question is, what are your thoughts on carbonated beverages?
You go first.
Well, um, I guess on the surface, if they're like carbonated waters, if they're
Mhm.
allowing you to get more water in on a
Mhm.
very generalized answer, sure, get more water in.
Yeah.
But if you're going to dive deeper into the carbonated beverages,
Mhm.
um, there's a lot more to it. And um, so the gases that go into the carbonated beverages,
Mhm.
they're not the best. And so they're going to be doing some behind the scenes damage
Yeah.
to your body.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Do
and
you
you
want
can
me to
go in,
talk about
yeah,
that?
go ahead and go into like what those actually can do
Okay.
um, for the individual that is addicted to carbonated
Okay.
beverages.
I know. I see this so much. And I am bubble averse. I hate bubbles in my drinks.
I do too. I cannot. Well, I will say I am bad, and I do like the occasional Diet Coke, but it is. I can't even have a whole one to be honest. Like it's just too much.
Yeah. And well, and that's another thing is that there's so many people with abdominal symptoms, right? They
Hmm.
they they bloat,
Yep.
they you know, anyway, there's lots and lots of abdominal symptoms that people are walking around with, and carbonated beverages. So, like just on a surface level, you're introducing carbon dioxide or a gas right down your esophagus into your stomach, and
Hmm.
that can exacerbate bloating. Um, so, that's obviously problematic because that can put pressure on. There's a little ringed muscle at the base of your esophagus leading into your stomach. There's this ring it's a sphincter muscle, and if if there is pressure, like if your stomach, if you consider it's kind of like a balloon, and so if it's blowing up with all of this gas, that puts pressure on your esophageal sphincter, and that can loosen up, and then stomach contents can wash back into your esophagus because of the pressure. So,
Hmm.
for people that struggle with gastroesophageal reflux disease or heartburn, carbonated beverages can certainly make that worse. They can make bloating, just overall bloating, worse. Now, here is my personal pet peeve. Um, I I cannot stand carbonated beverages, and it's because they burn my mouth, and I hate.
Mm.
And so, um, I did a little research into the mechanism of this, and carbon dioxide bubbles, when they hit water, which, there is a fraction of your saliva, a fairly large fraction, that is water. And so when the carbonation hits your saliva, it there's a chemical reaction that occurs, and it creates a substance called carbonic acid. And carbonic acid, it burns, and some people, I don't know why, they like the burn, uh, but I hate it, and I will actually, if I'm drinking something that was carbonated, I will shake it vigorously and leave it on the counter for a very long time, and then I'll drink it. So I don't like carbonic acid. One of the things that it can do is kinda eat away at your enamel.
Hmm.
Um, and especially if we've got now there is kind of this trope going around that, well, regular soda is better for you than diet soda because diet soda has these artificial sweeteners in it that are terrible for you. There is a little bit of truth to that. However, I don't want people bathing their teeth in sugared beverages either,
Right?
right? I mean, it's like, dog poop is better than eating strychnine. Okay, well, neither one of them is particularly good. Um, to that end, I would say, if you're going to bathe your teeth in that sugar solution, and then you've also got the added carbonic acid that is etching away at your enamel, it's just kind of a recipe for dental disaster.
Right. Absolutely.
And those are my thoughts on carbonated beverages.
Yeah. So I guess the bottom line is like, just don't. Just kidding.
Right.
No.
No, I like what you said. I like what you said initially
Yeah.
about about if that's something that you really love, like I will, if I'm getting people off of soda, there are
Yes.
all kinds of recommendations I'll make, like get like a tonic water,
Mhm.
some kind of barely carbonated stuff, and then sweeten it with like a splash of fruit juice or add lime juice, or something to kind of flavor it up naturally,
Mhm.
and then slowly wean yourself off.
Right, exactly. Um, yeah, and if you guys are big like pop drinkers, soda drinkers for you
Hmm.
guys in the South, I think that's what you guys say.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
pop to me, or Coke.
um, we love stevia or no Zevia, sorry. Um,
Mhm, mhm.
so if that's a good option for you, um,
Yeah. No, I love Zevia. It's wicked expensive. When my kids want soda, I will go to Costco and get a case of Zevia, but it is crazy expensive. Um, you will have some sticker shock, but maybe that whew, maybe that will help you to wean off of the soda. So,
exactly,
yeah,
exactly. So
yeah,
that could be a great option if you guys are trying to get off of a soda. Um,
yeah. Mhm.
sorry,
Oh, that's okay.
the dogs have convened to play, so I'm gonna
Oh, okay.
getting out of their way.
All right.
Okay, so next question. Um, what are your thoughts on magnesium foot baths? And I thought this was a great question because
Mhm.
um, there's little known about the feet. I mean, and their power of absorbing uh, nutrients. And I guess not, I don't know if nutrients is the right word. Maybe supplements, or even like what's the word I'm looking for, Andrea?
Well, there the
Minerals.
yeah, there you go. There you go.
So magnesium foot soaks, I don't honestly know a ton about them, but I do know the feet are in a great mechanism for um, minerals.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't think that the feet are necessarily super special in their absorptive abilities, but they are skin, and the skin is very good at absorbing minerals. Um, and honestly, it's easier to stick your feet in something than it is to, I guess, sit in something. I don't know.
Yeah,
Stick your arm in.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, transdermal magnesium is a great thing. That's why Epsom salts baths are so effective at muscle relaxation, because magnesium as a mineral, provided you get the right salt of magnesium, otherwise you could be pooping your brains out. But
yes,
um, magnesium, you want to be real careful. But you get the right salt of magnesium and you put it in a bathtub in the form of like Epsom salts, and it is highly relaxing, and it is really, really good for relaxing skeletal muscle in particular. So, if you've got sore, tired, aching feet, you can imagine that if you stick your feet in a magnesium bath, that you get a lot of magnesium taken up transdermally or across the skin.
absolutely, yes.
Yeah,
So yeah,
I
if
love it.
I love them, yeah. I think they're great. Okay, next question is, what are your thoughts on berberine, HCl for thyroid and other health functions?
Okay, now this one left me scratching my head a little bit. Berberine, and again, here's here is a problem with online searching for information, because you can literally find an affirmative answer for anything that you search. Like, for instance, if I go online and I search for, is berberine good for, and you put in anything, it will come back in the affirmative. It will go out and find that somebody has said or made some statement that berberine is good for whatever you typed in. And so that's problematic to me, because
Yes.
I want to know, is there research?
Yes.
Like, do we know for sure? So here's what I can tell you about berberine. Um, Berberine is a very potent supplement. I love it. It has been very widely and well studied for glucose metabolism, and in the keto circles, it's kind of called a glucose disposal agent. Um, but if I'm treating somebody that has type 2 diabetes, and I'm probably always going to add a little berberine kicker to their daily regimen, because it helps to lower blood glucose. It helps to deal with dietary inputs of blood glucose. So I love it for that, and it's well studied, and there's a lot of data behind that. Also, what a lot of people don't know is that berberine also has some really great anti-infective properties. And so it it has antimicrobial effects. It is antifungal, and it is also has, I believe, some antiviral effects as well. So it's just a really amazing compound. And I'm going to step out on a limb here. I also think it can function as an antioxidant in the body, but don't hold me to that. It's just kind of in the back of my brain for some reason.
All right.
But I think that's true. So berberine is a really, really impactful supplement, but I wouldn't know what the effect on thyroid health is, except to perhaps reduce the overall inflammatory burden in the body.
Okay. Perfect. So next question is, how much can one really control type 1 diabetes with diet?
Yeah. Um, this is also a big question.
Yeah. Do you
these
have your big
these
girl pants on?
I do. My big girl pants are up to my neck right now. So type 1, type 1 diabetes, to differentiate from type 2. So type 1 is that form of diabetes where the body attacks its own pancreas. So the pancreas is what cranks out insulin. There are these pancreatic beta cells that respond to blood sugar levels, and when they get high, the pancreas says, "Oh, we need to make some insulin so that we can dispose of the glucose and use it in the cells. We take it out of the blood, we put it in the cells." So in a person that has type 1 diabetes, their pancreatic beta cells are actually being attacked by antibodies created by their own body, and we know that that's basically the definition of an autoimmune disease, is that you are attacking yourself. Your
Mm-hmm.
immune system is turning against yourself. And so in the case of type 1 diabetes, the immune system has turned its sights on the pancreatic beta cells. So they are no longer making adequate insulin, and as the disease progresses, they potentially make no insulin because all of the beta cells have been destroyed. Um, Now, there is some exciting research into, like, transplanting. They're also called islet cells, but transplanting these beta cells from another person into a diabetics body can potentially make some insulin endogenously
Wow.
again. But yeah, there's some cool stuff going on with that. But so back to the question, can you control it with diet? I would say not exclusively. And the answer might be a little bit surprising because we we can't necessarily like for instance, if you want to eat a very low carbohydrate diet, that will help with type 1 diabetes. It will help. um, but the fact is the body can turn protein into
Mm-hmm.
glucose, and it can also use dietary glucose to fuel it. Well, if you don't have insulin, none of that glucose is going to get into the cell. And so, even though you're eating very low carb, in order to meet your protein requirements, your body may be turning some of that protein then into glucose. And again, the type 1 diabetic is unable to use it because of there's not enough insulin
Mm-hmm.
circulating. So, yeah, so I would say the better control is to work with somebody that specializes in autoimmune disease as a whole
Mm-hmm.
and reduce the body's inflammatory burden, find out what dietary triggers are triggering the body to make antibodies to its own pancreas and work from that end. And I know that's kind of a complicated answer. So we're kind of going around to the back door to affect the type 1 diabetes rather than just looking at low carbohydrate. We're kind of going around the back and saying, well, we also want to affect the environment that this disease exists in. And we want to lower the overall inflammatory burden so that maybe the immune system will not feel as though it has to protect itself against the pancreas. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Agreed. Yeah.
Okay.
And so also to differentiate type 1 and type 2, type 1, I mean, both probably do need that insulin, um, I guess, shot or
Well, eventually, at type 2, we would hope that they never get to the point where they need insulin. But if it's uncontrolled, then yes, they will get to that point. But at
okay, yeah.
type 1, definitely does.
Yes, yes, yes. That's what I was trying to get to. Is like type 1
Hmm.
definitely has to have the insulin um, injections, but type 2, hopefully we can um, avoid that
Hmm.
if at all
Hmm.
possible. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, last question. All right. Okay, so I'll just kind of paraphrase this question. Uh if somebody is wanting to know if they are gluten sensitive, why don't they just have their blood tested instead of just going through a elimination diet?
Okay. So, a couple of things. One, there really is only one gold standard test for celiac disease. Um, and I guess the first thing I need to talk about is the difference between celiac and non-celiac gluten sensitivity, or
Mhm.
NCGS. That is actually a thing. Um, and everyone with autoimmunity, whether it's even if it's not celiac, okay, every other type of autoimmunity, they automatically have non-celiac gluten sensitivity. Most people don't eat like that, but they should. Um, and that's a topic for another day. Um, but they are sensitive to gluten. So now in the celiac patient, they actually have an autoimmune response to their own bodies, their own the lining of their gut that is triggered by the two wheat fractions. So when you ingest gluten, it breaks down into two protein fractions. One is gliadin and the other is glutenin. And so the body will react and create antibodies to gliadin and glutenin that will then turn around and attack the lining of the gut. And that's how you get the damage with celiac. And
Mhm.
celiac is a very complex disease. In fact, there is a dermatitis herpetiformis. That is a skin manifestation. It's sores on the skin related to celiac disease. There is celiac related anemia. Very often, these
Mm.
patients are anemic. There is also a celiac encephalopathy. So, this can mimic things like schizophrenia.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, celiac is crazy. It's very complicated. It's very complex. I would submit that I don't think we know exactly all of the things that are going on with celiac disease, but suffice it to say, how it's a serious issue. So the questioner is wondering, so why would we submit to an elimination diet when we can just do a blood test? Well, it's not that easy.
Mhm.
That would be fantastic, but we don't have the testing capabilities. What we can do is we can give you a blood test. It's called food sensitivity testing. I don't like it. Um, I I told Ashley she's going to have to keep me from getting too salty about this. Um, but food sensitivity testing, I'm not a fan, and if you want to know why, we can certainly talk about that at a later date. But I'm not a fan. Um, it basically gives antibodies, and in someone who is not gluten sensitive or who is a celiac. So let's take two people, all right? One is perfectly healthy and eats wheat every single day, like most people eating a standard American diet. They eat copious amounts of gluten containing products every single day. Now, you take a celiac on the other hand, or someone with non celiac gluten sensitivity, okay? Those two people, both of them can throw antibodies. Okay.
Mm. Okay.
So we can't differentiate. We
Right.
can't, we have no way of differentiating. Now, if you take a celiac that has been absolutely stringent for years and years and years and years, there is a possibility that their blood work will come back with no antibodies.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So how do we even tell? How do we even
Right.
tell? This is terrible science. Um, it is good for one or two clinical situations that I won't get into right now, but they're very specific situations. And I don't particularly care for the food testing of the blood. I just don't think the technology is there yet. I think it's moving there. We're getting better, but for right now, it's just an unnecessary expense in my mind. Okay.
Okay. Yep.
Um, now, the gold standard, the only test recognized by our medical establishment slash insurance companies slash everything else, the gold standard is to do an intestinal biopsy.
Mhm.
So they have to go in and they have to take a sample, like a physiological sample of your intestinal wall,
Hmm.
and they take that punch biopsy, they bring it back out, they put it under a microscope, and they see if there's something called intestinal crypting.
Hmm.
So that is like these invaginations that occur in the lining of the intestine. It's like little canyons that form. And if
Wow.
the canyons are deep enough, they will diagnose you with celiac. However, here's the gotcha. You have to have massive gluten exposure for weeks prior to this test, because if you if you remove gluten for 6 months or a year or 2 years, and then you decide, well, I'd really like to know for sure, and so your doctor orders this intestinal biopsy, you will come back with no intestinal damage, and they will say, nope, you don't have celiac.
Mm.
Well, of course you don't, because you haven't been exposed and your intestinal lining has had a chance to heal.
Mhm.
What we have to do if somebody is going to undergo this intestinal biopsy, we have to load them up with gluten for weeks prior to this test. Now, to me, that's really stupid. If
Mhm. Well,
someone
especially given that in our autoimmune series, we talked about the like
Yep,
one iota of
yep,
of
That's right.
exposure can take years to,
That's right.
yeah.
To fully heal, and
Hmm.
that is microscopic damage that can't necessarily be seen on a pathology report. They are looking for deep intestinal crypting to
Hmm.
be able to diagnose celiac disease.
Hmm.
So now there is that is the only gold standard test, diagnostic test for celiac. That's it. There is another form of genetic testing that is also a blood test, and uh, that is looking at is something called HLA typing or haplotyping, but it's just basically looking to see if you have the correct genes to make you predisposed to having celiac. So just because you have the proper HLA typing does not mean that you will manifest celiac disease, but it certainly makes it a much, much, much higher probability. That testing we can do. But again, I say if you are like, why not just do the elimination diet?
Hmm.
Right? I mean, there is absolutely nothing wrong with eating a wheat, barley, and rye free diet.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that. And it is absolutely ridiculous for somebody to come along and say, "Well, you're getting rid of food groups. You're getting rid." Bull crap. You are getting rid of trash carbohydrates. You're getting rid of highly processed foods.
Hmm.
And you can now, can you eat trashy gluten free? Of course you can,
Yes.
but not recommended. So,
Right.
yeah, that whole argument that you don't want to get rid of, complete food groups or whatever, that's just bullcrap.
Right. And if you're dealing with what what we talked about in our autoimmune series, is if you're dealing with any type of autoimmune, gluten is the first to go. And
Yep, yep,
if you know you have an autoimmunity, it's probably in your best
mhm,
interest
yep.
to just keep that out.
100%. And you know what? Um, I'm going to go even further and say you 100% you will see improvements if you get that out of your diet. Now, a lot of people think, well, 80/20 rule.
Mhm.
I'm 80% compliant. Nope, nope, nope. It's 100%. And you have to go to great pains to make sure that you're 100% exposures. You but and that sounds very onerous, and I get why people don't want to do it. I really do. But I've been eating this way for over 10 years now, well over 10 years now, and
Yes.
it is not hard. It just
No.
isn't hard. And so
Mhm.
once you get past that initial mindset, like, do the hard thing. Do the hard thing. It's worth it.
Exactly. Yeah. You will notice a difference for sure.
Mhm. Mhm.
Well, Andrea, that ends our list of
Okay.
very, very intense questions,
They
honestly. Like
really were.
those were really good questions, guys, and we're excited for more. So our plan is every month, like we mentioned in our first podcast, I believe it was, we want to hear from you guys. So submit questions. They don't have to be on a certain week or certain day, or anything like that. If you think of something to ask us, just shoot us an email or an Instagram message, and we will put that on the list for our monthly episode of our Q&A. And yeah, we're really excited that you guys were so interested in asking us these questions. So we will look forward to answering more next month. But I hope you guys have, or I guess I hope that this helps shed some light on one,
Mhm.
how you can ask us questions, but then two, how variable the answer can be based on the individual. So it's
Right.
not just a black and
Right.
white answer, and giving more context to why you're asking the questions will help us too. So
Yeah.
we hope you have a great rest of your day, and we will see you on the next episode.
Bye-bye.
The content provided in the AA podcast is intended for informational and educational purposes only. The podcast is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. The information and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute medical advice.